Hi class, we're going to look at serializing a live object graph as an XML file. I'm going to open Visual Studio and I'm going to create a new project. This is going to be a console application. I'm going to call this Serialize Object Graph as XML. Within this application, I'm going to use the person class as presented by our textbook. So I want to add a new CS file to the project. I'm not adding this to the solution, I'm adding it to the project. So I can select the project in Solution Explorer, and then I can right click and choose Add Class. That's a good way. Or I could choose Project, Add Class. That's a good way too. Either way is fine. When the template dialog comes up, we can name our class. This is going to be our person class. I don't have to put the .cs. Visual Studio will do that for me automatically, but I do need to make sure that it is properly named. In our person class, we'll create some documentation. We are defining a person object. Now in our person class, first of all, we're going to change it to be a public class so that we could use this in other applications. I'm going to start out with a region statement. And this first region is going to be public properties of the class. So our first public property is going to be, let me add an end region there. And I'm going to go up. They actually have the constructor first. So let's put a region statement for that. Constructors for the class. And our constructor always needs to be public and has to be, named the same as our class. Just person. Now this person constructor is going to expect a parameter, a decimal value that will be referred to as initial salary. Now within our constructor, we're going to set our public class property of salary equal to the initial salary amount that was passed to us. We'll get an error right now because we don't have that initial salary object created yet. But that'll be the end of our region of constructors. So that's the only constructor we have. You can put in a documentation comment there. And we'll say that this is our person constructor that requires initial salary. That should take care of our constructors region. Now let's do our public properties. In this class, we are not going to have any private data variables will only have public properties. So our first will be a string for our first name. We'll include getter and setter logic in the shortest way possible. Get colon and set colon. Now realize that just uses the automatic getter and setter and makes it where we cannot implement a sort of logic in our property, which is fine. I've got a date time, date of birth. It also allows a get and a set. I'll have a hash set, which is like a list, just like an array, but it includes a unique key, assigns a unique key for each entry in this list or array. We're going to use this to hold additional person objects. That's why we have person within the generic specifier here, the greater than and less than brackets. And we're going to call this list of people the children of this person. So we can have person objects within this list that are our children. And then our last property is going to be protected. And our protected decimal value will allow get and set. Now remember the big difference between public and protected. Protected will allow access of this property to other code, other classes within our solution, our project, and public would allow access to our property by any other outside class. So protected is just a little bit more open than private. All right, that should be the end of our public properties for our class. And actually, that's all we need at this point for our person class. Double check here, looks good. I'm going to go to my program.cs and add some code in to create instances of that person class and write them out to an XML file. First of all, I need to check my using parameters, the libraries that I'm importing into this application. We're going to get the date time data type from the system. We're going to include systems.collections.generic, and that's going to allow us to use that hash set with our data type in the greater than less than brackets. We're going to be adding and using for system.xml.serialization. This is going to give us access to the XML serializer, that component that knows how to take our data and write it as an XML file format. We're going to use system.io, this library or namespace will allow us access to the file stream object so that we can bind our serializer to a specific file. And then our using static parameters, we're going to include the system console, system.environment, and system.io.path. And those libraries are going to give us access to their properties and methods. Now, in our main, we want to start out creating an object graph. And that basically is just a list of objects. Our objects are going to be people. And you can see we're going to use the list data type to hold multiple people. Again, list is just like an array, just offers us greater capabilities like dynamically resizing. All right, our first new person that we want to add is going to make 30,000. I'm going to include an M on that to indicate that data type to our person class. Remember, our person class wants that to be a decimal object. And M indicates to C# that we have a decimal value there. Now, within our main, we can use some special syntax. And what we're doing here is kind of an embedded using statement. We saw that in our previous example, that using would release resources for us when our using statement was complete. Here, in this example, we're going to take advantage of that sort of syntax by specifying the parameter name, our property name, sorry, and then a value. So I'm updating this person to set each of these properties equal to the value supplied here. So for this first person, their first name is Alice, their last name is Smith. Try to indent here. Their date of birth is a date time object, so we need to create a new instance of a date time object. It'll be 1974. March 14th. Now, that'll be it for Alice. So I'm going to put a comma. I want to indent her date of birth here. And after my closing curly brace, I'm ready to add another person. So this will start out our syntax again. New person. Passing in their salary. Then an embedded using where I'm going to update, again, the properties of this user. This is going to be Bob. And Bob's last name is Jones. And his date of birth is a new date time, 1969, November 23rd. And after Bob, we'll have another new person. Only makes 20,000. Their first name is Charlie. Their last name is Cox. And their date of birth is a new date time object with a date of 1984 5/4, so May 4th. Now, Charlie, only making 20,000 a year, has some children. So we're going to put a comma here to add more parameter information for Charlie, his children. Now his children, again, we're going to enter is a new hash set of the type of object people. Within this list, we'll have an opening curly brace, and we're going to say this is going to be a new person, and we've got to supply that hash key. Well, actually, their salary here is 0 because they're a children. Now, this first name of this child is Sally. The last name is Fox. And their date of birth, it's a new date time object. They were born on July 12th of 2000. Now, let's see where we are. We need to close out this new person parameters in my green curly brace. So that looks good. It's closing it. Then after that, I'm closing my list of children objects with my pink curly brace. And finally, I've got my last curly brace that is going to be closing out Charlie Cox here. So that's all of the people that we want to add to this list. So we can put a semicolon after the list's closing curly brace to indicate that those are all of the entries that we want. All right, let's create the object now. That will format a list of persons as XML. We're going to call this list XS. This is going to be our new XML serializer. There it is. New XML serializer. And we're going to tell it that we have some input for this XML serializer that is formatted as a list. And that list is made up of person objects. Now, we've told our serializer what kind of list we want it to start with. Let's create a file to write our XML file to. We're going to use that path combine method, and we're going to combine our current directory, our project folder, with this new file name, people.xml. And now that we've got our file name set, we're going to open that file with our using statement as a file stream. So our file stream will be named stream, and we want it to create a file for us at the file name, or using the file name specified by our path operator. Now our using statement we talked about before will go ahead and allocate the resources for that file and create the file in our file system. All of the body of our using statement then will be executed, and then when we're done with our using statement, we reach the end of it, the using statement will automatically close the file stream for us and release all resources. All we need to do within our using statement is tell our serializer to do its work. We're going to ask it to write the output to our file stream object named stream using our serializer for all of our people. Now, people, remember, is our list name. So that is all the instances of our person objects. And the serializer that we already set up is the one that we're saying, hey, here's your output and here's your input. So that's all we need for our using statement. File will be closed and resources released. So our using statement is very powerful. It relieves us the responsibility of opening and closing our file. After we've processed our file, we're going to output an informational message. We have written parameter 0, formatted as a number with no decimal places, bytes of XML2, and then we want to use our parameter 1. Now replacement values for those parameters are 0, should be replaced by a new instance of a file info. On our path, remember we've already created our path right here, that's our file name. So let's get some file info for that file name, and the info we want is the length of the file. How big is it? Next, for R1, we're going to output that file name. So we're going to output our path. Oop, extra parenthesis there that I did not need. After we output our information, let's go ahead and output a blank line. And then we're going to display the serialized object graph. And an object graph is just like all of the instances of an object. Like if you thought about objects that were blue, we would have like more blue objects. Read all of the text in the file identified by our path variable. So let's try running our application and see what kind of errors or fun things we get. We do receive an error. It says that we can't serialize our person because we do not have a parameterless constructor. Well, we can take care of that if that's what you want, Serializer. Let's go back to our person. And in our constructor area, we only have this one constructor that requires our initial salary. Let's create another constructor. That does not require any parameters. And we'll call this our default no arg constructor. Hang on. So let's put a comment above that. And it's called that because it has no arguments. Okay. All right, so we need that for the XML processing to do its thing. I'm going to do a save all. I'll switch back to my program.cs to run again. And my output this time looks pretty good. Let's see, I'm going to back up to the top. And here's the message we output, that we wrote 776 bytes of XML to people.xml in this folder, etc., and our path name on the C drive. And here's the XML. First, we have our XML declaration, and then our array of person. And in this example, this is our root object. There's the end of our root object, array of person. Now within that, we have several people. Here's Alice Smith, Bob Jones, Charlie Cox, Sally Cox, that child. So looks great. We've gotten all of our XML objects output. We see information for all of the different instances of our class. Now, if we'd like to, we can make a really small change in our person class to make our XML be generated in a compact format. So let's try that. Go back to our person class here, and in our properties, we're going to add a decoration, a flag to each property. So my decorations use square brackets, and I want to say XML attribute. So I'm giving my XML attribute a different name. I want this one to be called FName. I'm getting an error, so let me go up and add an import. We need to add a using statement for system.xml.serialization. Now we should see our decoration attribute look much better. It's understood. And we want to add a decoration to our first name. XML attribute will be L-name. Our date of birth. We'll make it real short, DOB. And that is all the decorating we'll do. Let's save this. And I'm going to go back to my program.cs and run this again. And now we see that we have the same information. Here's our array of person root object, and here's several different person objects. But because we've used a compressed format, a shortened format, we're seeing all of our XML elements here within the one person element, and our person element is using a condensed format so that the end person does not even repeat the name of the element person. So that's compact XML. Now, after we've saved this XML, we're going to need to read it in to do something, right? We're going to need to have things happening. So let's do that. I'm still in our main method here, our class tester. So we have our serializer code taken care of now. After our write line here, let's add some code to deserialize. This would normally be in another program where we're reading the data in, and it might be data that we were given by a different programmer or developer. We'll get the idea here. First of all, we're going to create a variable to hold all these people, and this is going to be a list of person objects. And we're going to go ahead and write in our list specification, we're going to specify that we want to use the deserialize method of our XS object, our XmlSerializer. Now, this code for our variable should be within a using statement. In this using statement, we're going to create a file stream object because we cannot read a file without a file stream object to connect, again, our code to the operating system's file. In this case, we're going to use the file open method to open the file specified by our path string object, and we're going to tell the operating system we just want to open this file. We don't need to create it or anything like that. Okay, so within our using statement then, we're going to create our list of people objects. Says our parentheses can be removed. Oh, I see, I got them in the wrong place, making everything all mad. So my list and my person specifier should be within its own set of parentheses. So we're kind of casting our deserialized objects into this list of loaded people. So what's going to happen internally is our XmlSerializer will get one entity from our file, and it will cast that as a person object that is an item within our list named loaded people. XML load. So this is specifying our file name that we just opened. So it's going to take care of loading all of those person objects into our list object named loaded people. And now we should be able to go through our list. They should all be put right back just like they were in the first place. In this new list, let's see, we'll have a parameter here. And we're going to output a message about a person object that has children. So the information is going to be the last name of the person object, and then our children, we're going to use the count method in the list class, because remember, our children are a list. Let's check it. I need to end my using statement here. Get rid of any errors that I might have. So my deserialize is actually really a great deal. It's just accomplished by opening my file and then specifying that I want to run the deserializer from my XmlSerializer object using the file. So here we've got our condensed XML file that we displayed, and then as we come back in and execute our read, we see that in our new person objects, Smith and Jones both have 0 children and Cox has 1. So we can tell that we are indeed reading that data, that information. So we can handle those person objects now in any way that we wanted to, because they have been created in our list. That's it for serializing and deserializing to an XML file. Thanks.